Hi, it's CNT140. We are looking at Chapter 3. Now, Chapter 3 is going to give us kind of like an overview of our installing wiring. As we come back in Chapter 4, it's going to dig in more detail on standards-based install and all the specifics. So just treat this as an overview for now, giving us some big ideas of things. All right, with that in mind, oops, get back there. We're going to wade in. Again, understand some basic elements of safe cable install. First thing they talk about in here is some central guidelines dealing with standards for install. And the first thing they mention is your National Electrical Code, your NEC code. Our install, any sort of cabling install, needs to meet these guidelines. These are safety for installing electrical outlets, electrical lines, and along with that, telecommunication lines, and that deals with phone and data cabling. If I go look at the NEC website, and I actually have it linked here on D2L, I have in here NEC and NEC, the website. I'm going to get to the National Fire Protection Association, and in that is in this case, the 2017 National Electrical Code. In here is guidelines on all kinds of different things for installing electrical wiring, electrical outlets, that sort of thing. Well, a subsection of the electrical code has to deal with communication systems, the 800 section. This, for the most part, would encompass the things that we would be dealing with: installing telephone lines, installing data lines, and how to do them safely so we don't have shocks, so we don't have electrical shorts, so we don't have fires due to the installation of these wires. So in here they're mentioning right off the bat the stuff we do needs to meet the NEC, specifically the 800 section. Well, the nice part is, as we install to our standard, or our ANSI TIA 568 standard, that stuff pretty much encompasses the National Electrical Code guidelines on how to do things. So that's the nice part. If we kind of follow the standard, it's encompassing a lot of these things. But in reality, if I am installing in a building somewhere, I would need to make sure that I'm following these guidelines, these standards, and also any specific local codes. Example, some of your building codes are specified by county, and one county might require that you use platinum grade cable everywhere. The next county may only require it in certain locations. That's just one example. So as you're dealing with installs, you want to be following the NEC code or our standard and any sort of special local codes. And that'd be something that, you, the new guy on a team, you're not kind of expected to know all that, but it's stuff over time you would learn. Or you go to that to look up the specifics on how it should be done. The thing we're really going to be focusing on is the ANSI TIA 568 standard, because for the most part that encompasses all these other smaller standards that I should be doing things. When I do it this way, it should be addressing all these other standards that we would encounter, all these other rules, if you will. The idea of installing our cabling to the 568 standard is it should allow for interoperability with different equipment. Example, I should be able to sit down with my Apple laptop and plug into the network and get internet connectivity. I should be able to sit down with my Dell laptop running Windows and have internet connectivity. I should be able to use a Cisco switch and provide network connectivity for my computers. I should be able to use a Netgear switch and have provide internet connectivity for my users, etc. I should be able to plug a telephone in of brand A or a telephone of brand B and still have phone connectivity in my building. That's the idea behind all this. And again, they remind us, they mention that this ANSI TIA 568 standard encompasses many other standards for installation, including the electrical code and other things that are out there, guidelines for installing that. So if I go take a peek at our Chapter 3-4 content page, you'll see in here that I have ANSI 568 downloadable PDF. If you open that, you're going to get this Annexter guide, and hopefully you recognize that from reading our book. Our book mentions Annexter quite a bit. This little PDF is kind of a summary of a whole bunch of standards that we encounter dealing with our networks and network cabling. So it's quite a handy one to download and save. What we're going to zero in at first, as you notice, the first one on the bat is your ANSI 568C, C01, C2, C3. We're going to be focused on that quite a bit, and then eventually the 569, next one on the list. So this is a great thing to be handy, to have handy. And I also actually have it saved here as a PDF, so that link will get you there, or this you can download and save it yourself. All right, so as we're installing, we should be following that 568 standard because it encompasses a whole bunch of other ones for safe install, for interoperability, for connectivity between different brands, etc. That's the guideline. That's the idea behind those standards. And again, am I going to? I always joke, am I going to get arrested if I don't follow this? No. What's going to happen is things may not work or may work very sketchy, or I might actually be violating a local building code. Fun side story on that. Once upon a time, I worked home remodeling. I helped the owner of the company. It was his company. I was following his guidelines. We installed insulation too fast in a facility. The inspector came around, could not see the electrical wiring in there, made us take all the insulation out so he could inspect the electrical wiring, and then checked us off, and we were allowed to basically reinstall the insulation. So when they talk here about knowing your local codes or your local inspector, that's important when you're doing installs, to know what they're looking for, when they want to see what. That way you can efficiently put things in and correctly put things in and not have to tear it out and redo it, so to speak. So that's kind of a little fun side story of, hey, these things do matter. These things do matter. Alrighty, so for the install, they gave us some guidelines. Okay, I'm going to elaborate on a couple of these to give you an idea what they're talking about. First thing they talk about is work with correct design. Yep, a good design is going to follow all these codes that we talked about, the 568 standard, going to follow the electrical code, local codes. It's going to meet what the customer needs as far as cable drops and future need and all that kind of good stuff, and adhere to the cable lengths. And as we hopefully remember from 120, the maximum distance for UTP, recommended maximum distance for UTP for carrying a signal is 100 meters. So following the standard is going to ensure that I have connectivity for everything below that 100 meter max distance for unshielded twisted pair. Second guideline, they talk about using proper components. I need to make sure my components are properly rated for the need, and all my components should be of that category. So I give you an example here. We talked a little bit about structured cabling so far, and we talked about how we're going to have outlet jacks with unshielded twisted pair cabling connecting the outlet jack back to the patch panel in the closet. So as I look at those three pieces here, outlets, cabling, patch panel, these should all be rated the same rating for my facility. So category 6 outlet jacks, you'll notice the rating right there. Category 6 UTP cabling, it's actually printed on the side of the cable on a label. It's labeled on there so you can see it. Make sure it is. And then your patch panels you're terminating to, make sure they are rated for that. That way all these pieces match. It's going to perform as you want it to. I was going to say, this thought of the system is only as strong as its weakest link. If I start using category 5E jacks over here and everything else is category 6, the system is really only capable of category 5E performance. So all these need to be rated. You need to be able to see that, verify it, and make sure they are all the same rating for the system. Third one they talk about is, excuse me, never abuse your cable. There's two things they mention here, or two things I'm going to mention for you, is when you're installing the cabling, there's some guidelines on how to do this. Well, I'm going to quick pull up the 568C standard here and show you what they're talking about. There is actually guidelines for pulling tension and bend radius for cabling. So let me go pull the standard up. Let me pop over here. Here's our standard. I'm going to go to the 568C standard. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit. It's a little background. Okay, here's the table of contents. I'm going to the 568C standard. C0 is the first part. And in here I see under the table of contents that there is maximum pulling tension, and there's also even a, in here as I look at it, there's also bend radiuses. So let's scroll to what the standard calls for. And when they talk about balanced twisted pair, they're talking about the twisted pair that we're used to dealing with. Excuse me. And the maximum pulling tension they tell you is it should not exceed 25 pounds of force. Well, what they're telling you is as you're installing this cabling, it should be coming out of the box nice and smooth. You should be installing it in the trays in the ceiling with minimal force, guiding it along. You're not pulling on it and hanging on it for all you're worth to pull the cabling into the trays. When you do that, you're affecting the structure of the cable inside, the wire twists inside. You're starting to untwist those, and you're affecting the cable performance when you do that. So installing the cable, they're giving you a guideline. Don't pull on this very hard. They also tell you that as you're installing the cable, the bend radius of this, you should not be doing sharp bends. They're telling you that the cable bend radius should be 4 times the cable diameter. Well, let me pop back over here. There was the pulling tension. Here's the bend radius, 4 times the diameter of the cable. The cable is roughly 1/4 inch, so you're looking at about an inch bend radius for it, but you know, it's 4 times the diameter. So they're talking, hey, this should be a nice round bend here so you don't have a sharp corner. If you bend it around a sharp corner, you're flattening out the wires in there and you're getting rid of the wire twist. And if you're bending hard enough, you might actually break the copper conductor in there. So as you're installing cable and going around corners, you're doing nice gentle bends around corners. That's what you're seeing here. You're trying to protect the cable. You're not trying to abuse the cable in any manner. That's the kind of thing they're talking about. Okay, so when you talk about abusing the cable, there are guidelines on how to do this, and that's why they're there. The guidelines are there so you don't abuse the cable. One of the next ones they talk about is watch out for interference. Keep away from sources of noise, and that includes power cables, fluorescent lights, motors, that sort of thing. And there is a guideline in the, I actually have this listed wrong, it's actually the 569 standard. There's actually a guideline in the 569 standard that tells you how much separation. So I'm going to pop up, here's my standard, and I actually just scrolled to the 569 standard, so you don't have to watch me scroll through it. And in here, if I go to the second page of the table of contents, you'll see that there is actually pathway separation from EMI. So we're going to scroll down there, showing you the kind of stuff they have listed. Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay. In here is our building pathways general. I'm going to keep going. Here is our separation from power cables. Now, this gets rather deep in here. There actually is a table depending on the type of power line, how far away you should be. So that gets really complicated. But I'm going to keep it simple and just give you 1 or 2 simple examples. The first one, let me scroll down here to the next page. They say, hey, twisted pair cabling should be kept away from fluorescent lights by at least 5 inches. One of the reasons is fluorescent lights are actually glowing because the 120 volt electricity going into that tube is energizing the gas in there, and it's actually flickering on and off 60 times a second. So because of that signal going through there and basically energizing the electricity, the bulb, and then stop, energize, stop, energize, stop, energize, stop, it doing it 60 times a second, it's creating all kinds of magnetic fields. So we want to keep our cables away from that. They're saying, look, at least 5 inches of separation. So that gives you one idea of the kind of staying away from noise sources that you have. Here's another one. I don't need you to dig into that, but it gives you an idea of there are distances for this based on the type of power lines you're dealing with. But I'll throw another one at you. In here it says, hey, if you're dealing with data wiring and power cables, if they cross at right angles, there really does not need to be any separation. And the idea is, instead of having 2 pencils laying next to each other, I literally cross one over top of the other one. If I have my data and my power line crossing it, almost like a plus sign when you look at it, there's minimal area that they're affecting each other. So they're saying, hey, if you have to cross paths, cross at right angles, and that'll minimize the amount of interference you get. So yeah, we got to watch out for source of interference, stay away from them, or do some of these guidelines are telling you stay so many inches away or cross at right angles, that's the kind of thing. Okay. And they also talk about upgrade. As you install cabling, if the customer needs the equivalent of like Category 5E performance today, gigabit, you might actually want to install Category 6 to get them 10 gig that they might need down the road. So, you know, if they need one, maybe consider installing the next grade up for future. The last one they mention here is about think about moves, adds, and changes. There is special guidelines in here for places like cubicles where things might move a lot. They actually have in the standard a way to handle that where you can install the outlets in a special manner, almost like above the ceiling in a little pod, to allow changes in moving these cubics around with minimal cable, connecting, disconnecting terminations. All right, we'll come back to the next one, continuing on from here.